"There is a woman living in your stables, your grace," said the agent, "and I am afraid I must tell you that she is on the wage list." The Duke of Vinter set down the rent roll he had been reading for the last hour by the light of a single branch of candles, in a house he had inherited 11 weeks before and entered 40 minutes ago. On the list as what? Mr. Sowerby turned the page toward him and put his finger on it, and Everard read in a clerk's neat hand, under the heading Stables Hollowmed, the entry: Undergroom C. Ashlock, £14 per annum, no board. "Ashlock," he said. "Yes, sir." The late owner of this house was named Ashlock. "Sir Gervase Ashlock, sir, died in November." Mr. Sowerby's voice had gone very careful. "C. Ashlock is his daughter, Miss Cordelia Ashlock. She is 26, and she has been on that list since the 14th of January, and she sleeps in the 2 rooms over the harness range, and she has charge of 11 horses." Everard sat back. He had come to Hollowmed to sell it. That was the plain truth, and he had made no secret of it. He had 11 estates, 4 of them heavily encumbered, and Hollowmed Grange had come to him out of a marriage settlement drawn in the year 1741, through a line of cousins he had never met, and he had every intention of putting it in the hands of an auctioneer by Lady Day, and applying the proceeds to the drainage at Vinter. He had also spent 9 years of his life as a land agent, before a fever in Lisbon carried off 2 cousins in a fortnight, and made a 4th son into a duke at 31. And a land agent reads a wage list the way a physician reads a pulse. £14, he said. "No board, show me the establishment." It was all there, and it took him 20 minutes, and by the end of it he had stopped feeling anything at all, which was what always happened to him when he was becoming very angry. The will of Sir Gervase Ashlock, proved in December, made the following dispositions: to his hunter Roman and his hunter Corsair, and the grey mare Juno, and 8 others by name, a charge upon the estate of £200 a year for their keep during their natural lives, they upon no account to be sold or put to hard work. To Beddoes, stud-groom, an annuity of £40. To the widow, Lady Ashlock, the plate, the pictures, the furniture, the carriages, and the whole of the personal estate absolutely. To his son by that second marriage, Mr. Vial Ashlock, £10,000. And then, in the last clause but one, after the horses and the groom and the plate and the pictures, to my daughter Cordelia, such sum as shall remain of my personal estate after the several bequests hereinbefore made, if any. Everard read that clause 3 times. "If any," he said. "There was nothing remaining, sir. The personal estate was exhausted." Mr. Sowerby was not looking at him. "The young lady received nothing whatever, and as the Grange itself came to your grace under the settlement, she had no house, no income, and no legal claim of any kind. There is a marriage settlement of the first wife. There must be. Ashlock married a Loveday of Curton in the year 96. I have seen the mention in the abstract of title. £6,000, sir, settled by the first Lady Ashlock's father in trust." A pause. "I am told it was paid out last spring." "Paid out to whom?" "I am told, sir," said Mr. Sowerby, "that I had better not repeat what I am told." Everard got up and took a candle. He went out through the cold, empty hall, and it was empty. The walls had pale rectangles on them where 40 pictures had hung, and there were 4 nails and no clock, and the great staircase had been stripped of its carpet, and across the gravel to the stable range, where a lamp was burning in the second window over the harness room at 11 o'clock at night. The stable-yard was the only part of Hollowmed Grange that was in good order. He noticed that at once, and it told him more than the will had. The cobbles were swept. The water trough was clean. There was a barrow of dung standing squarely by the muck heap, and not beside it. The door furniture was oiled, and 11 horses were bedded down deep on straw that had been shaken out properly by somebody who knew that a horse will not lie down on a bad bed. He climbed the outside stair and knocked. The door was opened by a young woman in a plain dark gown with a shawl over it and a candle in her hand. And Everard's first coherent thought was that she had been expecting a servant and had not troubled to arrange her face, and that consequently he was seeing what was actually on it, which was exhaustion. Her second expression was recognition. Her third was nothing at all, arranged very quickly and very well. "Your Grace," she said, and curtsied. "You are welcome to Hollowmead. I am sorry there was no one to receive you. There is no one to receive anybody. Mrs. Netherby comes up from the village 3 days a week, and she is not here tonight." "Miss Ashlock?" Yes. Behind her he could see the 2 rooms, a bed, a table, 2 chairs, a small fire, a shelf of books, a saddle over a trestle with a needle and waxed thread lying on it where she had been stitching a girth. There was a plate on the table with bread on it. "You will want the keys. They are here." "I do not want the keys." "Then I do not know what you want," said Cordelia Ashlock, "and I am too tired to guess, so I hope you will tell me." Everard found himself, for the first time in 8 years of being a duke, entirely without a prepared remark. "I want to know," he said at last, "why you are on my wage list at £14 a year with no board." "Because it was the only clause in my father's will I could get inside." She said it quite levelly, without bitterness, in the voice of a woman who had worked something out and was rather proud of the arithmetic. £200 a year is charged on this estate for the keep of 11 horses that may not be sold or worked. That is a real charge. It binds you as it bound my father's executors. Wherever those horses are, somebody must be paid to look after them. Mr. Beddoes is 68 and has a bad chest, so I went to the executors in January and offered myself as undergroom at £14 out of the 200, and they were glad enough of it because it saved them hiring 2 men. Her chin came up half an inch. "It is not charity, sir. I earn it. There is no other roof in England that I have any right to stand under, and I would rather be a servant to my father's horses in my father's stable than a poor relation in my stepmother's parlor in Bath. I have thought about it a great deal, and I am satisfied that I chose correctly." "Where is your stepmother?" "In Bath with the pictures." "And your brother?" "Half-brother a flicker there the first crack. In London. He has £10,000. "And your mother's settlement, 6,000 in trust." Cordelia Ashlock looked at him for a long moment, and something guarded came down over her face like a shutter. "That is gone," she said. "I am told I signed it away. I do not wish to discuss it, and there is nothing to be done, and I should be obliged if you would not raise it, because it is the one thing I cannot be sensible about, and I have got quite good at being sensible." Everard stood on a wooden stair in the cold, with his candle guttering. He had been the 4th son of a 4th son. He had been 19 and had walked from Portsmouth to Winchester because the coach was 3 shillings, and he had been a paid land agent for 9 years, and had eaten in the steward's room at houses where he now dined at the top of the table. And he knew precisely, in his bones, in a way that no born duke on earth could have known it, exactly what it costs a person to say, "I have got quite good at being sensible," and mean it. "Miss Ashlock," he said, "I came here to sell this house." "I know, Mr. Sowerby's letter said so. I have written out an inventory of the horses with their ages and characters, in case a purchaser should want it, and I have listed which of them can be turned away and which must be stabled, because if a buyer takes them without knowing he will spoil them." She nodded toward the table, where there was indeed a fair copy in a clear hand. Roman is blind in the near eye. Nobody knows it but me and Beddoes. It ought to be told. You have made an inventory, Everard said slowly, of the 11 animals who were left £200 a year in the will that left you nothing. Yes, said Cordelia Ashlock. They did not write it. Why should I be angry with a horse? He did not sell Holomed. He told Mr. Sowerby so at 7 the next morning, before he had shaved, having spent the night in a bedroom with no curtains and no carpet and one blanket, listening to a woman cross the yard at past 5 to feed 11 horses that had been left £200 a year. Write to the auctioneer and withdraw it. Then write to my Aunt Quillam at Bath and tell her I want her at Holomed within the week with her own maid, and as much of her furniture as she can bear to travel with, and that I shall be extremely grateful, and she may say what she likes to me for a 12-month. Mr. Sowerby's pen stopped. Your Grace intends to reside. My Grace intends, said Everard, to find out what has been done in this house, and I cannot do it from Vinter, and I cannot keep an unmarried gentlewoman under this roof without a respectable woman in it, and I will not leave her over the harness range for 1 more week. Those are 3 separate difficulties, and my aunt solves all of them at once. Write the letter. Mrs. Hester Quillam was 63, the widow of a naval surgeon, poor for 30 years and comfortable for 5, and she arrived on the Friday with 4 cartloads of furniture, a canary, and an entirely accurate understanding of the situation, which she had obtained by asking her nephew 2 questions. Which rooms is the girl to have? Her own, whichever they were. And does she know she is not a servant? No, said Everard. That is the difficulty. She has organized her whole existence around being one, because it is the only arrangement that has ever been offered her that did not require her to be grateful. Aunt, you must do it. If I do it, she will hear a duke being charitable, and she will refuse. His aunt looked at him with great interest for rather longer than he liked. How very unusual, she said. Well, leave it to me and go and read your deeds. What Mrs. Quillam did took 8 days, and Everard never learned the whole of it. It appeared to consist chiefly of demanding help, with the canary, with the unpacking, with a bad hip on the stairs, with the impossibility of finding anything in a house one did not know, until it would have been unkind rather than proud to refuse. And at the end of it, Cordelia Ashlock was sleeping in the blue room on the first floor that had been her mother's, and coming down to dinner, and being called Miss Ashlock by Mrs. Netherby, and had been struck off the Holomed wage list on the grounds, as Mrs. Quillam put it, that she could not possibly be undergroom and companion to a duke's aunt at the same time, and the aunt had the prior claim. She would take no allowance. She was immovable about that, and Everard, who had once refused a Christmas box from an employer for reasons he could still remember exactly, did not press her. She did, however, take charge. He had not asked her to. He had merely made the mistake, on the second evening, of inquiring at dinner why the 4 cottages on the Ledbury boundary were entered in the roll at £3, and the 2 by the mill at 7. And Cordelia Ashlock had answered him for 11 minutes without drawing breath. The state of every roof, the name of every tenant, which of them had lost a cow and which of them was drinking, which field flooded in February, and which farm had been let too cheap in the year 22 because the agent's brother-in-law was in it, and that if his Grace intended to lay out money at Holomed, he should begin with the culvert at Ledbury Green, and not with the house, because the house could wait, and the culvert had taken a man's leg in the spring. Everard put down his knife and looked at his aunt, who was looking at her plate with the expression of a woman who has swallowed something enormous. "Miss Ashlock," he said, "how do you know all that?" "I have lived here my whole life, and I walk a great deal," she said, "and nobody has ever had the smallest reason to be careful what they said in front of me." He was at Hollowmed 11 weeks, when he had intended to be there 4 days. He got the culvert done. He got the roofs done. He went round the estate with her on a horse called Corsair, who was legally entitled to £200 a year, and had not been ridden since November. And she told him what to do, and he did about 2/3 of it, and argued with her about the rest. And by April, he had come to understand that Hollowmed Grange had been kept alive for years by a woman with no legal standing at all, and that Sir Gervase Ashlock had spent those same years at Bath and Newmarket. And he read the deeds at night, because he had been a land agent for 9 years, and there was nobody in England better at reading the papers of a small estate. The marriage settlement of the First Lady Ashlock, born Anne Loveday of Curtin, was drawn in September of the year 96, and was a perfectly ordinary instrument. £6,000 in the funds, income to the wife for her life. On her death, the capital held in trust for the children of the marriage, payable to a daughter at 21 or on marriage. The trustees were Mr. Josiah Paget, attorney of Marfield, and Mr. Hollis Pruitt, brother to the second Lady Ashlock. Attached to it, in the same bundle, was a deed of release dated the 9th of August in the year 25, by which Miss Cordelia Ashlock, then 24, acknowledged receipt of the whole £6,000 and released the trustees absolutely. It was witnessed by Mr. Paget's clerk. It was signed Cordelia Ashlock. Everard looked at that signature for a long time. Then he got up and went to the estate table and fetched the fair inventory of 11 horses with their ages and characters that she had written out for a purchaser on the night he arrived, and laid the 2 side by side under the candles. Cordelia Ashlock wrote a looped and slightly backward-leaning hand, and she made her capital C in 2 strokes with a small hook at the top, invariably, 11 times in one document. The C on the release was made in 1 stroke, and there was no hook. He did not say a word to her. He wrote instead to a solicitor in London named Marchmont, whom he had trusted for 8 years, and to the incumbent of Curtin, and he waited 19 days, and at the end of the 19 days he had the thing whole. The Reverend Mr. Tuke of Curtin wrote that the 9th of August in the year 25 had been the day of the funeral of Mrs. Sarah Loveday, aunt to the late Lady Ashlock, that the funeral had taken place at 11 in the morning, and the mourners had dined at the rectory afterwards, and that Miss Cordelia Ashlock had been present throughout, had signed the visitor's book, had stayed 2 nights at the rectory because the roads were bad, and that his wife remembered it clearly because the young lady had mended a tear in the altar cloth for them on the Wednesday, and would take nothing for it. Curtin was 140 miles from Marfield. Mr. Marchmont wrote that the £6,000 had been sold out of the funds on the 11th of August in the year 25. That 4,000 of it had been paid to Mr. Hollis Pruitt, and 1,500 to Lady Ashlock, and 500 retained by Mr. Paget for costs. That Mr. Paget had within the 12-month also drawn the will of Sir Gervase Ashlock, dated the 2nd of March in the year 26, superseding an earlier will of the year 19, and that a copy of the earlier will had been retained in the office of the London agent, and could be had for the asking. Everard had it in his hands on the 23rd of April. The will of the year 19 left Hollowmed's contents to be divided, left Mr. Vial Ashlock £3,000, provided for the widow according to her settlement, charged the estate with the keep of the horses at £60 a year, not 200, and left to Miss Cordelia Ashlock the dower house at Ledbury Green, its furniture, and £8,000. 7 years later, at the hands of the same attorney, all of that had become such sum as shall remain, if any. He sat with the two wills in front of him until the candles were low, and what he felt was not triumph. What he felt was a kind of grief, because he was going to have to carry this across the hall and put it into the hands of a woman who had told him, standing on a wooden stair with a candle, that there was one thing she could not be sensible about. He gave it to her the next morning in the library with his aunt there, because he had thought hard about that and decided she should not have to be alone and should not have to be alone with him. She read the release first. She said, "That is not my hand," and then, "Oh," very quietly, as the whole of it arrived, because the moment a forgery is proved, everything that was built upon it falls, and she was working out in front of him exactly what she had been made to believe about herself for 2 years. "They told me I had signed it," she said. "In the March when my father was dying, Mr. Paget was in the room. My stepmother said she said that I had had the money in the August and spent it, and that it was known in the family, and that they had said nothing out of delicacy, and that I must not distress my father with it." Her hands were perfectly steady on the paper. "I did not remember signing anything. I thought I had. I thought that I had been ill in the August, and there had been a fever at Curtin, and that perhaps I had signed something, and I have believed for a year and more that I lost £6,000 of my mother's money, and could not even recall how." "Cordelia," said Mrs. Quillam, and put a hand on her shoulder. Then Everard gave her the will of the year 19. She read it twice. She got to the dower house and the £8,000, and she stopped, and she put the paper down on the table very carefully, as though it were hot, and turned her face away toward the window for a while. "He did mean to provide for me," she said, "in 19. Yes. And then he did not." She was not crying. "You must not make him kind, sir, please. I have had people explaining my father to me since the day he died. He signed the second one. Whoever held the pen, he signed it, and he had 6 years to alter it back, and he was not ill for all of them." A long breath. "But he did mean it once. I did not know that. I think I shall be a good while getting over knowing it." There was a silence, and into that silence, from the gravel outside the library window, came the sound of a carriage. Mrs. Quillam went to the window. Then she said, in an entirely new voice, "Everard, there is a barouche with 2 footmen coming up your avenue, and there is a lady in it in a great deal of black crape, and a young gentleman with yellow gloves." Cordelia Ashlock stood up. "That is my stepmother," she said. Everard received them in the drawing-room that had 4 nails and no clock, and he was very civil indeed, because he had decided in the 30 seconds it took to cross the hall that he was not going to say one word until he could say it in front of 30 people. Lady Ashlock was a handsome woman of 50 in a great deal of crape, and she had come, she explained, the instant she heard that dear Hollowmed was occupied at last, out of a sense of what was owed to the memory of Sir Gervase. And she had brought Vielle, who had been quite wretched about his sister, and who would be so glad to see her settled. "Settled," said Everard. "There is a gentleman, a client of our Mr. Paget's, Mr. Cleeve, of Marfield, a most respectable man of 54 with a very pretty property." Lady Ashlock's eyes went round the stripped walls with perfect composure. "One must be practical, your Grace. A young woman of 26 with no fortune whatever, who has been, one hardly likes to say it in a duke's hearing, who has been living over a stable and drawing a groom's wage, is not in a position to be nice. It has been a great grief to me. I begged her to come to Bath." "Did you?" said Everard. "On my knees, sir." "By letter?" A very small pause. By letter. How many letters? Lady Ashlock laughed lightly and changed the subject, and Everard let her, and invited them both to remain at Hollowmead for the county dinner on the 30th, at which he intended to make himself known to the neighbourhood. And he watched the widow of Sir Gervase Ashlock accept an invitation to sleep in the house she had stripped, and understood, quite calmly, that she had no idea whatever that she was in any danger. They were 6 days in the house, and Everard learned a great deal in them. He learned it chiefly from doorways. He heard Vile Ashlock inform his half-sister in the hall that she was making the family ridiculous, and that a duke's charity was a poor trade for a name. He heard Lady Ashlock tell her, in the passage outside the Blue Room, that it was very well to be given a bedroom for a few weeks, but that gentleman tire, and that Mr. Cleeve would take her without a settlement, and that she should thank God for it on her knees. And on the 28th he came round the corner of the stable range, and heard Lady Ashlock say, in the yard, in front of 2 grooms, "And you may look at me as you like, but you have been an undergroom in this very yard, drawing a groom's wage, and there is not a person in this county who does not know it. That cannot be undone, Cordelia. Not by a duke and not by anybody." "No," said Cordelia Ashlock, "it cannot. I do not wish it undone. I have thought about it a great deal, madam, and I am satisfied that I chose correctly." Everard went away without being seen, and walked twice round the kitchen garden, and then went in and wrote a note to Mr. Josiah Paget, attorney, of Marfield, requesting his attendance at Hollowmead Grange on the evening of the 30th, on a matter of business relating to the late Sir Gervase's affairs, and marking it urgent, and sending it by a man on a good horse. There were 31 at dinner on the 30th. 2 magistrates, the rector, 4 farmers who held the largest farms, the doctor, Mr. Sowerby, the ladies of 9 county families, Mr. Marchmont of London, who had arrived that afternoon with a leather case, and Mr. Paget, who was shown into the dining-room after the soup and given a chair by the door, and told that his Grace would come to him presently. Cordelia had not wanted to come down. Mrs. Quillam had told her, with perfect truth, that the alternative was to let a room full of people talk about her for 3 hours without her, and she had come down in a plain gray silk that had been her mother's, remade by her own hands, and she had sat where she was put, which was 2/3 of the way down the table between the doctor and a farmer, because she had asked for it, and Everard had judged that he owed her that much of the evening. He rose when the cloth was drawn. "You will forgive me. I have 3 things to lay before you, and then we shall have the rest of the evening, and I hope it will be a better one for it. The first is a wage list." He held it up. "It is the Hollowmead stable list for the year 27, and it is in the hand of the late Sir Gervase Ashlock's executor's clerk, and I found it in this house on the night I arrived. Undergroom C. Ashlock, £14 per annum, no board. Some of you have known it since January. Some of you, I am told, have thought it a curiosity." Nobody at that table moved. "Sir Gervase Ashlocks will charge this estate with £200 a year for the keep of 11 horses, who were on no account to be sold or worked. It left his widow the plate, the pictures, and the furniture. It left his son £10,000, and it left his daughter in the last clause but one, after the horses and after the groom, such sum as shall remain, if any. There remained nothing. So Miss Ashlock, who had no house and no income and no claim in law, went to the executors and offered herself as a servant to her father's horses at £14 a year, because it was the only clause in the will she could get inside, and she has kept that yard, and those animals, and as every farmer at this table knows perfectly well, a very great deal else besides, from the day her father died until the day I came into this house." Down the table, Cordelia Ashlock had gone the color of paper and was looking at the cloth. The second thing, Everard took a paper from Mr. Marchmont's case. A deed of release, dated the 9th of August in the year 25, by which Miss Cordelia Ashlock acknowledges receipt of £6,000, being her mother's marriage settlement, and releases the trustees. It is signed. On the strength of it, £4,000 was paid to Mr. Hollis Prewitt, brother to the present Lady Ashlock, £1,500 to Lady Ashlock herself, and £500 retained for costs by Mr. Paget, who is sitting by the door. Miss Ashlock did not sign it. On the 9th of August in the year 25, she was at Curton in Lincolnshire, 140 miles from Marfield, at the funeral of her great aunt. She signed the visitor's book at the rectory. She slept 2 nights there. The rector, his wife, and 11 other persons will swear to it, and the rector's letter is in Mr. Marchmont's hand. And Miss Ashlock has made a capital C in 2 strokes with a hook at the top every time she has held a pen since she was 9 years old, which any of you may verify from the parish subscription book in the vestry. A chair went over somewhere near the door. Nobody looked at it. She was afterwards told by her stepmother, at her father's deathbed, that she had had that money and spent it, and had best not distress a dying man about it. She has believed for a year and more that she lost her own mother's fortune, and could not remember how. I want that said aloud in this room, in front of her neighbors, because it was done to her in private, and it will not be undone in private. The third thing is a will of the year 19, drawn by the same attorney, in which Sir Gervase left his daughter the dower house at Ledbury Green and £8,000, and charged the horses at £60 a year, and not 200. I make no defense of the man. He signed the later will, and he had 6 years to alter it back. But you have all of you been told, since her father died, that Miss Ashlock's situation was her father's judgment upon her. And I am obliged to tell you that it was in large part the work of the 3 people who profited by it. He set the papers down. Mr. Marchmont has proceedings ready in Chancery against both surviving trustees, and the papers concerning the forgery go to the magistrates tonight, 2 of whom, as it happens, are at this table. Mr. Paget, you may go, and I should advise you to go to your own attorney and not to Bath. Lady Ashlock, Mr. Ashlock, your carriage is at the door and has been for 20 minutes. Nobody in this room will stop you. What Lady Ashlock said on her way out was not worth recording, and she said it very fast, and Vial Ashlock said nothing at all, and the door shut, and the silence afterwards was extraordinary. Then the Duke of Vinter walked the length of his own dining table, past 30 people, and stopped behind Cordelia Ashlock's chair, and offered her his arm. Miss Ashlock, your father's place at the head of that table has been empty since November, and it is not mine. It was never mine. I came into this house through a settlement drawn in 1741, and I have been here 11 weeks. Everything that has been done at Hollowmead since the culvert at Ledbury, the roofs, the letting of Marsh Farm, all of it, was done because you told me to do it, and there is not a man farming on this estate who does not know it. He held out his hand. Come and sit in it, not because I give it to you, because it is yours and always was, and this county is going to see you in it. She sat there for the rest of the evening, and she talked to the rector about the culvert, and her hands did not shake until she was safely out of the room, and then, Mrs. Quillam reported, they shook for about a quarter of an hour. The Chancery suit was not quick, nothing in that court ever is, but it was not seriously contested either, because a forged deed and a rector's letter make a very short argument. Mr. Hollis Prewitt paid £4,000 and 3 years' interest, and sold his house at Marfield to do it. Lady Ashlock paid £1,500, and the value of the Hollowmead pictures, which came back in 3 wagons in the following spring, and went to live in Boulogne on a very reduced establishment. Vielle Ashlock, who had had £10,000 and no part in the forgery, was found to have known of it from the beginning and to have said nothing, and was accordingly cut by every family in 3 counties, and eventually went out to Canada. Mr. Josiah Paget was struck off the roll and stood his trial at the assizes, and the sentence of the court was severe, and Everard did not attend, and never afterwards spoke of him. And in the following November, 2 years after the day Sir Gervase Ashlock died, and 3 weeks after the last of the money was paid into an account in Cordelia Ashlock's own name, and not 1 day before it, the Duke of Vinter asked her to marry him. He had waited on purpose, and he told her so. "You had nothing when I came here. Then you had a bedroom because my aunt outmaneuvered you, and then you had a place at a table because I put you in it, and I have been in love with you since about the middle of March, and I have said nothing whatever, because a woman with no roof cannot refuse a duke, and both of us would have known it." He was standing in the stable-yard, which was where he had found her, because he had discovered that he could not say anything important to her indoors. "You have £8,000 and £140 a year in Ledbury Dower House, which Chancery has confirmed to you, and I have had the deeds of that house sent to your own attorney and not to mine. You can walk away from me this evening and be perfectly comfortable for the rest of your life. That is precisely why I am asking you now. Cordelia, will you have me?" Cordelia Ashlock put down the bucket she was holding, because she had never once stopped going out at 5:30, and she looked at him for a long moment with her chin up. "You wretched, calculating, patient man," she said. "You might have asked me in March." "I might not." "No," she said, "you might not. That is rather the whole of why the answer is yes." They were married at Hollowmed in the spring, and the bride wore her mother's gray silk remade a second time, and the plate and the pictures were back on the walls, and there was a clock in the hall. Mrs. Hester Quillam wept into the canary's cage. Beddoes the stud-groom, 70 by then and pensionied at £60, walked her up the aisle at her own request, because, as she observed, he had been the only person at Hollowmed who had called her Miss Ashlock every single day of the months when she was on the wage list, and she considered that a debt. Everard settled Hollowmed Grange upon her absolutely on the morning of the wedding, cutting himself out of the settlement of 1741 by a private act 2 years later, and he was told by several people that no duke in England had ever done anything so foolish with an inherited property, and he agreed with them warmly, and did it anyway. The 11 horses kept their £200 a year. He would not hear of reducing it. He said the charge was a monument, and he intended to pay it. The blind hunter Roman lived 4 more years in the home paddock, and was led out every fine morning by the Duchess of Vinter herself, who talked to him the whole way and thought nobody heard her. Her husband heard her most mornings, from the window of the room where he read his deeds. He never once let it be known.